A coastal town in Western Australia gears up for a tourist influx as Juice prepares to get its launch down to the second. Plus, will Starship go orbital? And a Japanese probe gets ready to make history.
This is Trekzone's Talkin' Science.
This is the Bite Size Podcast, catching you up on the latest science and space headlines. The small coastal community of Exmouth in northern Western Australia is seeing an influx of tourists, all looking to gain the perfect view of a total solar eclipse on April 20. It's part of a rare hybrid eclipse that will occur along a narrow track extending from Antarctica to the Pacific Ocean's Marshall Islands. Making up about 3% of all solar eclipses, the hybrid eclipse will combine total and annular, or ring of fire events, which last occurred in 2013 and won't be seen again until 2031. For more info, Dr. Stuart Ryder is beaming in. Stuart, aside from its rarity, why is a hybrid event so special?
Good morning, Matt. Well, it's unusual because it's kind of a mixture of the two types of solar eclipses that happen here on Earth, and it all depends on the relative distance between the Moon and the Earth and the Sun. So the amazing thing really is that the Sun is 400 times further away in the sky than the Moon is, but it's also 400 times larger. So, as you probably mentioned, the fact that we get eclipses, total eclipses at all, is something of a remarkable coincidence. But sometimes, because the Moon's orbit is not a perfect circle, it's a little bit closer to us, and so it may not completely cover the Sun if it's a bit further away in its orbit, for instance. And in this particular case, depending on where you are on the surface of the Earth, at the beginning and end of the eclipse tracks, the Moon won't quite be large enough to block the Sun out completely, and anyone at those locations, of course, well, they're actually out in the middle of the oceans, but anybody there would only see an annular eclipse. The Sun would appear like a ring of fire, just a very thin piece of the solar surface still visible. But for those lucky enough to be near the center of the eclipse path, in particular those in Exmouth region on April 20th, the curvature of the Earth is enough to bring those people a little bit closer to the Moon, and that makes the Moon big enough to completely cover the Sun, although only for about a minute. And at that point, they'll be able to see this wonderful corona, the outer atmosphere of the Sun, that you simply don't get to see during an annular or a partial solar eclipse.
And I think the really interesting thing, with Earth covered by so much water, it is very rare as well for people on land to get an absolute total solar eclipse. What I find fascinating is that it's just 1 minute, and there are so many people from around the world travelling to Exmouth to experience this. Have you yourself seen a total solar eclipse?
So I've been fortunate to travel to different parts of the world over the last 30 years or so, and I've been to 12 solar eclipses. Unfortunately, the weather doesn't always cooperate, and I've only been able to witness 10 of those eclipses, although that's still a pretty significant number of eclipses. It's something just over half an hour that I've managed to spend in the Moon's shadow, which is it's a pretty spectacular sight, and something you never quite seem to get enough of. But unfortunately, I won't be one of the tens of thousands piling into Exmouth for the eclipse next week.
Certainly a very, very interesting experience, Western Australia, Northern Territory this time around. Not very often it happens for us here in Australia, so that's great. But we should, of course, have our public safety warning as well for those around that are going to be witnessing the annular eclipse. Staring at the Sun is never advisable at the best of times. What's the best way to view the eclipse?
So pretty much for anyone elsewhere in Australia, apart from that narrow tip of the Exmouth Peninsula, is not going to see that wonderful totality. It's never safe to look directly at the Sun. But pretty much everywhere else in the continental part of Australia will get to see what's called a partial eclipse of the Sun, so that the percentage of the Sun will be covered, down to about 10%, 20% in Sydney, Melbourne sort of area. And I think only Tasmania will miss out completely. But it's simply too dangerous to try to view that in any direct way. Probably the safest option would be, I'm sure, a lot of astronomy societies, amateurs who love showing the sky to people. They will have safe solar system viewing setups. So go online, find out what the plans are at your local astronomy society or local observatory, and they will have a setup that is either what we call a projection, so that the image of the Sun through the telescope is projected onto a screen that people look at the sun. They don't look directly through the telescope. There are some telescopes that are manufactured that have a special filter built into them, that can be attached by a qualified person. That does make it safe to view the sun directly. But really, the risk of damaging your eyes just for that opportunity to see a chunk taken out of the sun, it's really not worth it. But as I say, there are definitely safe options. And the other one, of course, is to go online and look for a live stream of the event. There's bound to be several of those, including some from the Eclipse totality zone in Exmouth. But trust me, seeing it on a computer screen isn't the same as experiencing the eclipse, because it's not just about the light visual effects that you get. It's the fact that you feel the temperature goes down in the middle of the daytime, which is really eerie. It's the fact that birds and animals think that evening is coming, so they start to go about their roosting behaviour, and then seconds later they have to wake up again. So and even just the reaction of the people around you, people who are normally quite sane and rational, but they get very emotional when they witness a total solar eclipse, trust me.
To allow for gravitational assists, Europe's upcoming JUICE mission will only have 1 second a day for the rest of the month to get its launch right. That's because it's taking the long way to Jupiter to study its moons via the inner solar system, getting gravitational shoves from Venus, Earth and our moon to conserve as much fuel as possible for mission burns at the gas giant. While this launch window is the tightest imaginable, the Ariane space team believe they can rise to the challenge with previous experience gained with automated transfer vehicles for cargo resupply to the space station. The space junk issue has led to a new space-focused division for the US Federal Communications Commission. It comes just a year after issuing its second space debris rules in 2 years, and is hoping to stave off future trouble with satellite collisions and the mitigation of launch and end-of-life related junk. A focus on planetary orbit has seen the FCC take key space-facing actions, including shortening timelines for removing old satellites from orbit, a proposal to update rules on connecting smartphones to satellites, and an April 20 vote to revise how satellites share spectrum. Japan's Hokuto R spacecraft is preparing to make an historic lunar landing attempt sometime in the next month. Landing windows are available on April 25 or 26, as well as May 1st or May 3rd. Launched in December atop a Falcon 9, the probe is currently in an elliptical lunar orbit with some stunning images already beamed back home. Atlas Crater is the target, and if successful, it'll be the first privately operated spacecraft to land safely on the lunar surface. SpaceX's website is hinting at an April 17 orbital launch for Starship, which will be its maiden attempt in reaching the high altitude necessary to continue the program. And while they still require a launch license from the Federal Aviation Administration, it seems that that's the only hindrance, as the rocket is stacked and ready to go at their Starbase site in South Texas. The reusability and sheer size of Starship will lead to greater economy with bigger payloads, according to SpaceX. Well, international and Aussie researchers have confirmed the discovery of 4 galaxies with the aid of the James Webb Space Telescope, with 2 research papers documenting the galaxies forming between the universe's 300 and 500 millionth birthday. They're in a distance category called extremely high redshift. That's so far away that the light from them has spread out towards the red side of the spectrum. They say each galaxy could contain 100 million stars, which could be less than 100 million years old. The program for the 15th Australian Space Forum has been released. In parallel to unprecedented growth in the Australian space sector, the biannual Space Forum affords industry, academia and government stakeholders an opportunity to develop key relationships and opportunities in the space economy. For the first conference of 2023, representatives from the Japanese Space Agency will be in attendance to give a keynote address, and so will Trekzone. We'll have special editions of Talkin' Science from Adelaide in the week of May the 8th. Will members get perks? Click join under every Trekzone video to sign up and get early access and behind the scenes for less than a cup of coffee a month. For our podcast listeners, jump onto the trek.zone/support. Clicking thanks under Trekzone's videos enables a one-time contribution, while heading to the trek.zone/PayPal is the most direct route into this podcast budget. The 20th anniversary live stream 4-hour marathon is coming up and could really use your help in that budget. Nothing fancy, just my pure dedication to the network for a decade, the website for 2. Do any of them today and have my eternal gratitude. Or simply continue watching, liking and subscribing. That works too. Let's keep the engagement up. Let's talk about Juice. Let's talk about these galaxies. Let's talk about the Exmouth Eclipse coming up as well. I'm Matt Mellor for Trekzone. I'll see you in the comments.